Thanks Dan and thanks group for the opportunity today to speak a little bit about what I've been able to experience in the past 9 years of coaching, and hopefully you can take a little bit from that and maybe take it back home with you and do what you can with that. I found out today that Kirk Myers and I have something in common, and that is the number 28. And he's gone now, isn't he? He knew I was going to speak. Anyways, so he mentioned today that he was 28 years old, and I just realized today that I've curled 28 years semi-competitively, played 2,100 games, mostly with Brian Humble and Bruce Cordy as third, and I've won 67% of my games, and I have no green jacket. So the old saying of those who can't do, no, it's not Darlene, are you there? No, it's not teach, it's coach, right? So anyways, I guess once I started coaching here 9 years ago, you soon start to realize it's not all about the wins and the losses, but it really is about the journey of your athletes along the way. You start to appreciate everything about the game more, your officials, your volunteers, your ice makers. You watch the game differently. When you're watching on TV, you're looking at the players that are being successful and you say, what's that guy doing with his release, or what is she doing when she's sweeping, and all the body language and all that. And as a curler, I never really enjoyed watching curling. As a coach, I really enjoy watching curling now. And just to pick out all those little intricacies of the game that maybe you never looked at one time, and maybe I should have back then, allows you to be more successful in your coaching along the way too. One of the things about that's really interesting is this brushing thing, and you know, Pat and I have had lots of conversations I've had with lots of other people, and we watch it on TV and they're doing completely different what we're talking about, and so it's something that I still don't think is figured out. Are we polishing the ice? Are we scratching the ice? And hopefully down the road we're going to be able to iron it out a little bit more, but it's really interesting to know that we continually learn about the game and how we can get better at it. Talk a little bit about the time spent. I used to think when I competitively curled that I spent a lot of time away from work and away from family. But once you get into competitive coaching, you realize that there's a lot more time required than there is to be just out there playing. And however, it is very rewarding. You know, the time we spent in our debrief with the boys this year, we broke down the amount of time we put into the game just to give them an idea of what commitment we've got and what we're going to need to do. And we figured we had 11 and a half hours a week of ice time on the ice. That didn't include any travel time, any meeting time that we had to do in preparation for all that ice time. So it's pretty easy to say that you're going to need 15 to 20 hours a week if you want to curl competitively at a junior level and be successful. And if you're Kirk full-time, you're probably at that 40 to 50 hours a week if you want to do that. So just a little bit about Ryland's team, the Ryland Kleiter team. I've been very fortunate to coach 3 of the 4 boys for the past 9 years, starting with Ryland, my son at skip, Josh Mattern at second, and Matthew Town at lead. And bringing them out basically when they were 11 years old, and I said, Ryland, just grab 3 of your athletic buddies and let's get out there and curl. Well, 10 years later, actually we're 9 years later, but we're going into our 10th year together with those 3 boys. The 4th boy will be his 6th year together. During those 9 years, we were fortunate to compete at 10 provincials at the different age categories, high school, U18, U21. We've been very fortunate to make to all 10 of those provincial finals while we're in that provincials, and we've won 7 of them. So, although I didn't win a green jacket, as I mentioned earlier, I got one hanging in the closet now anyway. So, and you know what's really amazed me with these guys and this team is that they're 35-0 in their last 5 provincials, and we're hoping that streak continues for one more season anyways, as we go and try to get to that elusive Canadian championship that we've been after. And this is all, you know what, while this team never made it to the Sask Winter Games or the Sask Winter Games trials, and it's just a matter of they wanted to work hard afterwards and compete at that. And I want to just mention, I don't think Pat's here, but that Sask Games trials, which I've had my younger daughter participate in, and I see those 6 boys teams and 6 girls teams that were part of that program just go like in 1 year, just to watch them progress is pretty amazing. So I'd actually vouch that we try to do that more than just once every 4 years, because I think there's that age gap that we tend to miss. So that those teams that were involved in the Sask Games are going to be the ones now they're going to carry the junior program for the next 3 years, and then we bring in another group. So if there's some way we can keep that momentum going like we did with those 12 teams, that would be awesome, I think. So there's no secrets in this curling game, and actually Rob Krebs at the Kevin Martin Curling Academy, which I've attended 3 times, they always come out and say, you know what, we're not holding anything back here. We talk about everything over the 3 days, and because the reason they say that is because of the quota that everybody knows, not everybody, but anybody that's done some coaching and playing knows what it takes to be a champion, but very few are willing to do what's needed to be a champion. So hopefully a few of these little tidbits that I give out will help you along the way, and give you some inspiration to maybe grab a team and get out there and really coach them along the way. A few things I want to just address on my experience in the 9 years at the different age categories, the U15, the U18, and the U21. One of the things that it was really fun and good to see is about that grade 11, 12 period is when I really see kids, if they're coached and they keep progressing, is that's when they really get that passion and they want to work to get better after that. I see in our high school program, which I help out as well in the city here, we get tons of grade 9 kids come out. A few of them make the team. The coaches can't do much with them. They're behind the glass. If they have time, they spend after the game going through a few things. But my passion, and I talked to Pat today, and I think we're going to be getting somewhere with this year, is that we need to have our coaches more involved with the teams during the games. And if you look at every other sport that we have out there, and at professional levels, there's an NFL quarterback, and he's got his coaches, whatever earpiece on, and he's telling them the plays, and they're signaling the plays in, and basketball the same thing, and it's just everybody has that coaches involved. And when I look at some of the coaches that have come and gone in our program, they come because they've got kids in it, and they end up spending that time that is needed because we don't have active coaching. And then once they're done with that, they go, man, I can't. If I have to take another team and spend the amount of time that I did on that, my wife's going to tell me to do this. And I think we need to be able to be coaching these kids like any other sport right throughout the game, and allows them to get to another level quicker, which then hopefully gets the passion quicker, and you're going to keep kids playing longer as well. So that's just my opinion on it, but that's what from my 9 years of coaching, I think. Another point about that. Sorry, I'm over 50. So next I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we do as a team. And which actually in this past year I've been able to almost complete my comp development coach certification, which I think there's maybe some people in here that have done that. It's a really good I guess certification to have to pull everything that probably most of the people are doing as coaches anyways, but it allows you to formalize it and maybe make it a little easier to manage. And I'm going to throw a slide up. I don't expect you to actually see any of it, especially Jerry Shoemaker won't be able to see it if he's here. But anyways, it's our annual training program that we use, and this goes back to that saying again, everybody knows what needs to be done, but who wants to do it and who's going to commit to do it. And our team has done that, and it's basically our annual plan. And I'm not going to go into details of it, but it basically starts May the 1st, and it ends on April the 30th. And so at the beginning of May, we've got some things we need to get done. It's sponsorship, getting them together. We do some fitness testing. We get our uniforms ordered up for next year so that by the end of June, and scheduling as well, I should say, by the end of June, everything is done. And from there, we can take a bit of time off in the summer, and then August, that early ice, which we really appreciate, CURLSASK does for us, and get out there and get going. So that's been a really great chart to make sure we keep everybody going in that same direction, and the goals are all set. Each of the kids that I coach, or athletes I should say, will have that printed and posted up in their room somewhere so that they're reminded of their journey along this way all the time. So last year we would have played about just under 100 games and practiced around 40. And I always encourage all kids, get to as many camps as you can. I don't care what sport it is or who's teaching it. If you've got time and the passion, go to these camps. You're going to learn something at each one. And if that comes back and is not what you think you want it to do, don't use it. But make sure you just get out there and go to those camps. Even myself after these many years of playing and coaching, I can still go to a camp and I'll learn something that I bring back. So encourage those kids. And I'll tell you the first time I took my boys to the Kevin Martin Academy, and they were just wowed by it all because they were pretty young. And we were debating whether we do it again. And the second time, we got way more out of it than we did the first time. And kids retain only a certain amount throughout their learning of that, so it was really good. You know, we work on all the technical, the tactical, the mental, nutrition, rest, and conditioning, all those things, and we break it down into some really neat training modules. Some of the things that we use for practice, some props. I think it's really great to always change up your practices. We'll use speed traps, lasers, iPads, bring in more people, having a look, making some decisions. You know, this is happening, what can we do? You can't coach in a silo. You have to have the support of many people around you. But one of my game changers that I feel has really allowed my athletes to excel, and that was both the boys and the girls that I've been able to coach, and that was I had them take third period spare in high school. And that to me is key. And I was talking to Steve Laycock last week, and I was going over a few things, and he said when he was in high school, he did that exact thing. He didn't do it as a team, but he took a spare, and that was when he went to do his practice. And the reason I say it's a game changer is that when you can bring these athletes to the rink when they haven't already been spent with a day of school, and then they're running to this activity, running that, ice becomes only available at 9 o'clock at night, when they probably should be getting ready for bed. They're not really into a really good practice. So just a real good tidbit, if you ever get that opportunity, get them out there when they're prime time and the mind and the body is ready to learn. Another one, a secret that I use, and that's, I have each of my athletes do a personal video. And that is, we have 20 points in the delivery. Each of the athletes knows each one of those points and can recite those at will. And they'll recite that at the beginning of the year with an iPad in front of them, and they go through the delivery. They lock it in, put it on their phone, wherever. They're at an event, things aren't going well, go back to that basic video again. And they'll go back, and it's all those points, and they'll say, oh yeah, I'm not extending, my release is soft, whatever it is. But it really allows you to take what you've learned and make sure you've always got it with you to use in the future. When I talk too about not being able to do this alone, it's virtually impossible. Along the way, I've had my first coach, and I always remember him, Jim Orr. You guys, most of you probably know Jim. I had my first coach at the age of 30, and that was Jim Orr. And he had a real passion for the game, and not that he was technically sound, they could change a lot of deliveries and so forth, but he knew what to say and when to say it to the people. And that, to me, in coaching, if you know what to say, and it's different for every person, you gotta know who they are and what to say when they need to be said. So he was one of them. You know, I've had Gene Friesen, Rob Krebs, you know, Pat Simmons the last couple of years, Bill Trishart with Curling Canada, all the seminars he hosts at Nationals. Earl Morris, I've been fortunate to meet a few times with Earl, and at one of the Nationals, and it's an interesting story, it was our second Nationals, and the first Nationals we started off 0-5, and it was not so fun when you're doing so good in your province and you go to a national and you start 0-5, and you're only playing 9 games. But we get halfway through this event at the second national, when we start off, we're 0-5. And I'm going to Earl, like, man, what do you say to these guys? They're, you know, you're so used to having so much success, and all of a sudden you're again 0-5. And he said, you know what, Dean, one of the things that I do with all my teams at major events is that halfway through that event, no matter what your record is, I end up have an individual meeting with each one of the athletes. And that's 10-15 minutes, allows them to get whatever's off their mind and to refocus and get back into what they came here to do. And sometimes, you know, you get so tied up and you don't want to talk to the whole team about something, but maybe that coach is a safe place to do that. And so I did that that year. We were 0-5, and then we won 4, but we were in the seeding pool, so I can't really count those ones. But the next year, when we had success, like last year, I did the same thing. Halfway through that event, I sat each kid down, each athlete, I want to call them kids, they're 21 years old, each athlete down, and we had a great conversation, and you know, I could feel inside that these guys were ready to go. They expressed a few things, and we just kept marching forward. So, really neat story from Earl. We worked with nutritionist Heather Hine, Ralph Schoenfeld on the sports science, really good. And you don't have to have a meeting with him. He doesn't have to be there. We do a lot of FaceTime with him. We could be at an event and we'll spend 15 minutes in doing that. And I know that Tyler Tardy's team, which my son Ron was able to go as the 5th to Worlds this year, they had 3 times throughout their national event where they had a different sports psychologist call in just on a FaceTime visit, just to go over a few things, I guess, and make sure their mind is ready where it needs to be. I'm sure, Corey, you guys did that at seniors too, right?
Yeah.
Sports psychologist 3 times a week.
Yeah. There's usually a liquor store down the road, so.
Was his name Johnny Walker?
So I mentioned a lot of names that have really helped us along this journey, but to be honest, this could not happen without having a bunch of other people that are really close to what you're doing. And on the boys side, I have John Mattern, who's here today as well, and on the girls side, Brad Kennedy. And without having those 2 guys and being able to manage a team by yourself is virtually impossible. And I watch teams that they use the iPad and they chart the whole games, which I feel is very important. John and Brad do that with every game. I know for a fact that I can't coach and do that at the same time. Just to be into that game as much as you need to be, to make some decisions, and you only get 2 timeouts, but to make sure you're using those timeouts effectively, because there's times you could call it, but then you're going, well, no, I'm going to need it later on, so I better let this one go, and then you go, oh shoot, I should have called it earlier. And it's to me as a coach, those things are really frustrating. And with the boys now who are 20, turning 21, I've got them where it's not as big a deal. But when you're talking these 15, 16, 17-year-olds, there's so much learning to be done, and to have to spend that time after each game to go through it, then hopefully they remember for the next situation they're in, versus being able to confront that right from the beginning is, I think, not only is that going to benefit the team, you're going to have more coaches that want to be part of this because they can feel they're part of influencing the decision versus sitting back and not doing anything except for their 2 90-second timeouts. And you got your pre-game meeting and your post-game meeting, and that's about all you get. So unless you're willing to spend 9 years of really hard labor hours going through to get these kids up to there, I believe we need more impact. So, and I think talking to Pat today that we're going to pilot that project at the Slams field in North Battleford this year. So hopefully that'll go through and continue to grow from that. So talking again about Brad and John charting everything, it really confirms what you're probably seeing, is what my experience has been, but you do have that backup. So you're not playing a favorite to this person or that person, you've got that, you know that where you're at. And it allows you, when you're doing your year-end debrief, which we did this year, you've got all the information you need to have a really productive meeting. And we had this year, we did a start, stop, continue debrief after our season. And I was going into this going, okay, this is going to be our 10th year together. Boys are going to say, let's continue this, continue that. Well, to my amazement, we went up there and there was a full page of starts. And that was just to get a little bit better at all the things we were doing, but still a lot of starts, which they wanted to just not only close the gap, but extend the gap is what they're trying to do. And to me as a coach, having them from 11 years old to watch them do this, they're smarter than me now, but just to see them wanting to continue to grow and is really rewarding. A couple other things before I finish here is our pre-game and post-game meetings. One of the things we did this year was we do our goals at the beginning of the year. So we have our outcome goals, our performance goals, our process goals, and we have this on what I have my Bible, which many of you that have coached will see I carry a book, and we'll have all those goals listed on the front page. And before every game, I'll go through one outcome goal, one performance goal, and the most important one, the process goal. And sometimes it can be applied from a game we just had that we need to go back to this process goal to get us back on. But then it brings them present as to what we went through to design versus just make a goal, put it under or in a filing cabinet, and you never look at it again until the season's over. So I think just keeping those goals refreshed was key. In our post game as well, making sure we talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, but also making sure we end with a bouquet for each athlete at the end to keep them motivated and ready for the next one. And any of you that have coached, I think would agree with me, the losses are sometimes your best meetings that you get to have with these kids or athletes, because it allows you to put things into perspective, but also they're not going back to the hotel room thinking about that game and that missed shot and oh boy, I blew this. You allow them to pull it together and move on to the next one, and that's so important to do that. So make sure those post and pre-game are effective meetings, not just a meeting to get together and give a high five. And the other couple things we did, and I find this has been really effective for our teams. We have a song, usually one song that we can get into that zone when we need to. We do posters, and for me now, going into our 10th year, I have pictures of our whole journey of 10 years, and there'll be a full-page pictures like this we just print, and that's the first thing these athletes do when they get to the hotel room. We post the whole room with paper of that journey, and this next year, our 10th year, is going to be our most exciting one because we've got so many pictures that we have a hard time finding enough tape to get them all up in the wall. And we do get heck from the hotels every once in a while. It really does pull that team together and share some of that journey thing that we talk about all the time throughout that. So, and we have a phrase and a handshake. Again, those of you that have coached against us will see that we do a secret handshake that pulls everybody together, and with that is a phrase. And again, it just brings everybody together when they're maybe moving out into the wrong direction. So, and the very last thing I have to say, guys, is Wayne Kyle has put up numerous slides before about what the coach's responsibilities are, and for those of you that have seen it, there's usually about 50 words on there that the coach is responsible for. And as we mentioned before, it's pretty much impossible for the coach to do all those things. But if I had to say one thing, actually two things, that a coach really needs to do, and that's move the ship, and that's with great communication, and that's through good times and bad times, and that's holding them accountable, making sure you have some way that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. It's no different than in a workplace. You're running a company, you do the same thing. And this is pretty easy with all the social media groups we got available, groups that we can set up to communicate. These kids are on their, athletes are on their phones all the time. They're always getting the messages, so I think that's where I'm gonna leave it at today. And an old, a passed away humbled coach would say that there's no better day than today to be a curler. So thank you for that. I'll take any questions you got.
Dean,
Yeah.
one of the toughest things we find as curlers is to, everything's going great when you're winning, and then when you start losing, and we all lose as much as we win, we have over, the personalities and everything change and stuff like that, so the sport's very difficult. I can imagine what challenges you've gone through over the past 10 years, but here's a question that I've noticed over the years with curling and with coaching is, there's two types of curlers. There's artists and there's technicians. And most of these kids and these curlers nowadays brought up are being taught to be technicians. What happens when the technician breaks down and you don't have, you know what I mean? That's something, and we see it in, no disrespect to Rachel Holman, but I use that as an example. When they get into a situation where something isn't quite right, the ice is a little bit off, they can't win. I look at a team like Anna Hasselberg, for instance. They win on all sorts of ice, no matter what they do. That's what makes the good and the bad. Is there anything that you can do as a coach to these young kids, or what do you do in those kind of situations, or how do you teach that?
Yeah, for sure. I guess maybe that first question about being a technician versus an artist, and I think you're right there that a lot of us as coaches have said this is exactly how you need to do your delivery, and these are the 20 points and how you have to do it. But you soon realize as they get a little bit further along that, okay, this guy doesn't do it quite the same, but he's making everything. Mm-hmm. So you allow him to do that. And so that, as a coach, that's what I look at. I'm not saying you've got to do it this way. If you start them at 10 and you want to try and get them in a certain role, then I think you can do it a little bit better. But I think you got to let them go with what they've got. Some guys are toe sliders, right? How do you don't going to convert them to a flat foot slider? And on your second point there was about when they're in a bit of a flux, and how do you bring them back? Is that?
Yeah, like you know, how do you deal with, you know, I think you did touch on it on some of the things where we win more than we lose, right? And everybody's great and they're happy and they make more shots and everything's great when you're winning, but when you're losing, you know, it's somebody's fault. And that's one of the things too, is that a lot of people, they set targets, or when they set their goals, they set a goal of we want to win this, rather than setting a goal and saying we want to do this, or try to practice this hard, or practice this many times. They set the goal at the end and say we want to win, and then when you don't, it's a complete letdown, no matter how hard you've played or committed or whatever, right? So how do you again with over the years, how do you set it up with your team with those goals and stuff like that?
Yeah, you know, it's still about keeping the game into perspective, okay? And setting your goals and everything is something to keep everybody present. But at the end of the day, and I've always preached it at every major event we've been to, I said, guys, this is what's going to happen at this event. You're going to have this, and you're going to have this, and you're going to have this, and you're going to have this. The team that's going to win this event is the team that can do this along the way. And you learn different mechanisms, Corey, about how do I manage if my intern is over curling and I'm just missing this shot. And Ralph Schoenfeld would tell you, if you're not curling the best you can, make sure you're sweeping and you're calling line and you're doing everything else out there the best of your ability. And that allows you to focus less on maybe what's not working at the moment, but allows you to make sure that you're still contributing. Because you're not going to play 100% every game, but make sure that when that's not working, something else is. And
And I guess the sport's involved like anything too, right? Like, back to the technician and artist thing, when we were playing, we had no choice but to be artists, right? Because there wasn't really anything, you know, we weren't taught the technical part of it. You know, we were taught to throw in a straight line and make sure everything's square, but everybody threw different, right? So we had no choice.
Guy Hemming's a good example of that.
Yeah.
Not technically sound, but could make shots left, right, center, right? So. Any other questions?